Red Holler, narrated edition. By sundown, half the county wanted to shoot it. The bulletin board at the Oark General Store was buried under new flyers, photos of ripped chicken coops, mangled fence wire, a blurry shape at the edge of a trail cam frame that could have been a bear or a man in a rug, or the ridge itself deciding to stand up and walk. Old men in ball caps argued at the back table that it was a panther or a tweaker or a prank. Harlan Cutter, who ran a logging crew out toward Fly Gap, slapped the counter and said it was a terror, his word, and they'd run it out with dogs and rifles. I was there for gas and a soda after work. Mud dried in maps on my shins from flagging trail along Big Piney. Mrs. Reese slid a moon pie across the counter like she always did when she thought someone needed sugar more than advice. "You be careful out there, Ray," she said. "Folks get stupid faster than storms roll in." "Storms roll honest," I said. "People, not so much." Another flyer went up. Missing dog, Ranger. Last seen Haw Creek Falls. The picture showed a shepherd mutt with one ear half folded. "Things ripping up sheds," Harlan said. "Throwing rocks big as bowling balls. Whoops at folks from the timber. I say we sweep the hollers and end it." "End what?" I asked, and didn't look at him. He looked at me anyway. "Whatever's out there pretending it owns our woods." "These woods don't belong to any of us," Mrs. Reese said, calm as rain, and rang up his jerky like she hadn't said anything at all. I told myself I wasn't going to care. I had a job, flag a safer line around a washed-out bluff, and a truck payment that didn't accept ghost stories. But just before dark, when I drove past Haw Creek, I saw two things that kept my foot on the brake. Fresh orange flagging torn down and thrown in the water like streamers, and, on a flat rock near the trail, 3 river stones stacked neat as prayer. It was an odd little altar, or more likely, a teenage joke. Except the stones were too clean, no grit between them, edges still wet, and the stack wasn't far from a thorn bush with a strip of bright red fabric snagged in it, the kind you get on a kid's sweatshirt or a dog's collar. I texted my friend Milo before I even knew why. "You free? Bring your recorder." He replied with a skull emoji and a location pin. Milo liked 2 things more than his own lungs: weird noises and bad ideas. By 11 o'clock, we had a plan that was really just a dare dressed up as science. Milo would set up his parabolic mic and digital recorder at the edge of the creek. I'd circle upslope toward where the rocks were, see if there were prints in the damp, maybe, catch whoever had been yanking down my flags. If it was kids, we'd scare them good and go home with a story. If it was a bear, I'd back out slow and confess later that I'd been an idiot. We parked without headlights and killed our phone screens. The creek's voice filled the trees. The dark pressed in, thick and close, smelling like wet cedar, old leaves, and rock. Milo whispered, "You sure about this?" "Nope." He grinned like a possum. "Outstanding." I made the ridge in minutes, heart loud enough to scare squirrels. The stacked stones were gone. In their place, a small spiral of twigs laid end to end. No wind dropped that. No raccoon did graphic design. My mouth went dry. Something popped a branch to my right, not the crackle of a squirrel or deer, a clean, deliberate snap. I froze. The dark above me was a lattice of pine. The dark beyond it was more dark. "Ray," Milo's whisper, tinny from my earbud. "You hearing this?" A sound rolled up from the creek. Not a coyote, not an owl. A whoop that rose and bent at the top like a question, then fell into a rumble you felt more than heard. It made the hair on my arms lift. "I've got it," Milo breathed. "God, I've got it. Do it again." As if the woods took orders, something knocked, 3 heavy raps, like a club against a trunk. The third thudded the ground under my boots. "Not a bear," I said, and tasted metal and water. Another snapped to my right. Then a small rock flew out of the dark and skittered at my feet. Fight or flight is a coin toss. Mine landed on stupid. I raised my light and thumbed it on. The beam hit bark, then shadow, then something too broad to be a man and too tall to be a bear. The eyeshine wasn't predator yellow. It was a cold, glassy green, set deep under a heavy shelf of brow. Hair hung in mats down the shoulders. The air carried a low animal musk, yes, but also something like wet stone after lightning. It didn't step into the light. It didn't need to. The light proved enough, and my brain finished the outline wrong. My hands shook anyway. It lifted one long arm and opened a palm. "Stop, don't, enough," then pointed that same hand downslope toward the creek, toward Milo, toward the new moon smeared in the water. The gesture wasn't a threat. It was a shove made with air. Another knock, closer. Then a sound like a sigh unspooling from a chest the size of a wood stove. A flash from the creek cut the dark, not lightning, headlamps, voices, laughing, loud. Harlan's full of beer and dare. "You hear that?" he shouted. "Come on then. You big bastard!" The figure slid back behind the trunk, silent as a thought. The forest swallowed it like it wanted to keep it. "Ray," Milo hissed. "We got company. Cutter's crew, 6 guys, dogs on leashes, shotguns." "Get out," I whispered. "Now." The whoop came again, farther west like a lure. The dogs hit their leashes and bayed. Harlan whooped back, idiot for idiot. The forest answered with silence that felt like depth. And then the rain came, fast, hard, as if the sky had been holding its breath and finally let go. In 1 minute, the creek swelled. In 2, the rocks turned black and sleek. In 3, the trail was a vein of moving water. "Milo," I said louder. "Go." "I'm packing," he said. I heard his recorder snap shut, saw the blur of his headlamp swing. The beam picked up a glint, eyes, low, dog height, and then chaos. The shepherd mutt from the flyer burst from the brush, leash trailing. Ranger. He barreled straight into Milo, knocked him sideways, then bristled, growling toward the trees across the creek. Not at Harlan. At the slope beyond, where the water chewed at a wall of soft stone. "Milo," I said, "get up the bank, now." Harlan and his men splashed across, shouting. One fired at the sound that moved in the dark. The shot ricocheted off stone with a flat, ugly ping. The dogs yelped and skittered. The rain laughed. The slope gave. It didn't collapse all at once. It sagged. A soft fold, like someone pulling a rug from under a table, slow enough to make you watch each glass wobble. Then the center went, a rotted plug dropping out of an old mine cut into the hill back when men hunted zinc and came home missing fingers. The creek flooded the hole like a mouth. Trees leaned toward it and tipped in like drunks. Harlan's men stumbled. One fell to his knees and slid. Milo grabbed a root and clung. Ranger anchored himself wide-legged and snarled. What I saw next is the part that people either believe right away or decide I'm telling it wrong. I am telling it right. Something hit the slope above the hole and moved downhill on 2 feet. Not a slide, not a scramble. Steps. Deliberate. Heavy enough to thud through rain. It didn't go at the men. It went at the trees. 2 hard shoves and 1 pine went over like a battering ram, bridged the sink for a second, and jammed in the far bank. The second shove tossed a log against the current to make a low snag that slowed the water just enough for a body to wade through without being eaten. A hand, big, dark with wet hair, closed around the back of Milo's jacket and hauled. Milo came up the bank like a fish on a line, coughing, swearing, still clutching his recorder to his chest like it mattered more than oxygen. Harlan fired again. The shot shredded needles off a limb. The figure turned, not startled. Measured. The eyes found him, found me, found the hole. Something like a bark came from its chest, short, commanding. It pointed at Harlan with the same flat palm it had used on me. "Stop. Back, now. For God's sake, move," I yelled, voice cracking. Harlan hesitated 1 drunk heartbeat too long, then stumbled backward, fell, scrabbled up. The edge of the hill where he'd been standing dropped and took a wheelbarrow of mud with it. The creek slid a tree into the hole and vanished with a sound like a gasp. The thing, the guard, the terror, the whatever word you put on it, took 3 long steps up and melted into the timber so clean I couldn't track it with a light. We got out. Nobody died. We left Ranger's leash tied to Milo's belt and ran until the general store's porch light was a holy thing. After, there were explanations. The sheriff stood at the sink pouring coffee and listening while Harlan told it like he'd saved us all, like he'd seen a bear and spooked it off, like he'd planned to check the old mine map all along. The sheriff's brow got 8 new lines, and he sent men with barricade tape and sawhorses to close the trail. Milo uploaded sound files to 3 different drives and spent 2 days editing out the rain. He played me the clean sections in his garage with the door down and the rain gutter spitting and the smell of oil and pine sap thick as syrup. We heard whoops. We heard 3 hard knocks. We heard my breathing go ragged. We heard Harlan yell. We heard the dogs and the shot and the sudden dropping roar of ground opening. And we heard something else, a shape moving through brush with the cadence of a long walk, not a run. A low rumble that might have been breath, or might have been the sound a chest makes when the voice is too big for the throat. "What do we do with it?" Milo asked. He had a dozen message drafts in the outbox to Cryptid forums and a 2-sentence email to the sheriff and one to a professor at U of A who studied weird in legitimate ways. Nothing, I said, and surprised myself with the certainty of it. We keep our mouths shut and our feet off that slope. He looked at me like I'd kicked his dog. Ranger, asleep under the workbench, thumped his tail once as if to say finally. This is evidence, Ray. It's someone's house, I said, or church, or graveyard, or whatever word you put on a place you'd break your whole body to protect. He closed his laptop slow. You think it's, what, a person? I think whatever it is, it's not ours to hunt. Word got around anyway, like it always does, only it wasn't our words. It was Harlan's, stripped of the part where he shot into the dark and almost died for it. Over a week, terrorizing the forest turned into stalking hunters, which turned into attacked our boys. Men in camo rolled through town and left empty beer cans along Pilot Rock Road. Someone spray-painted "Kill the Monster" on the barricade at Haw Creek, and 2 nights later, someone else painted over it with "Keep Out" and 3 stacked dots under the letters like a signature. I went back up when the rain let up and the mud did more holding than sliding. Not to hunt, to see if the tape held, and if any idiots had decided to go make their own channels on the internet by falling into a hole and live streaming it. The trees above the sink had new scars, bark scraped, limb ends snapped and smoothed by hands, not teeth. On a stump where we'd scrambled sat a small construction of twigs and grass bound with a strip of red fabric in a figure-8 knot, the same color as the scrap on the thorn bush. I circled it, careful where I put my boots. Something heavy had stood there. Toes pointed toward the hole. Heel for hours. A woodpecker drilled somewhere up the ridge. Another answered further off. For a dumb second, I imagined Knox spelling letters, like there was a code I could learn if I listened hard enough. Then a branch popped 10 yards to my left. I didn't turn the light on. I didn't need to. I get it, I said, voice low. I won't bring idiots back. 2 knocks. Not loud. Just enough to say heard. When I told Milo later, he tried to make it a plan, to run cables, to leave bait, to set up tripwires that took photos without flash. He's a good kid, and I'll forgive him even if he insists on getting older and stupider at the same time as the rest of us. Just a few nights, he said. We can be the first to do this right. You want to be a first? I said. Be the first to not ruin something. He didn't talk to me for 2 days. Then he texted a skull emoji and a location pin for the trailhead, and we went up anyway, with a roll of caution tape, a Sharpie, and a sign that said dangerous condition. Do not enter in big block letters and smaller words underneath about the mine and the unstable slope. We zip-tied it to a post and smeared it with mud so it looked sun-bleached and boring. We left food, not because we were trying to bribe a myth, but because Ranger liked jerky and had earned it. Harlan gave up his campaign, or got bored, or found another ridge to scrape. For a while, it went quiet. Folks went back to losing arguments about the Razorbacks and complaining about the price of diesel. The old men at the store went back to their back table and their weather maps and their good-natured doomsaying. Except at night sometimes, when wind poured down the timber like water and the ridge seemed to lift and breathe, you'd hear it. A whoop that wasn't an owl and wasn't a coyote and made the skin on the back of your neck tighten like a pulled thread. If you were the kind of person who went quiet when you heard that, you heard 3 knocks after, spaced like warnings or like greetings. If you were the kind of person who shouted back, you heard nothing at all. One evening in October, just before the first hard frost, I stopped by Mrs. Reese's to drop off some spare flagging and pick up a jar of pickled okra because you only live once, but your taste buds can die and be reborn. She slid a small paper sack across the counter like it weighed something weird. Inside was a dog collar. Red. Frayed at the clip. Boy came by this morning, she said. Said he found it hung on a nail on his fence out near Arbaugh. His daddy swears they never nailed nothing there. Dog in the picture, right? Ranger? He's asleep under Milo's bench like a chest of drawers, I said. Healthy as taxes. Good, she said, and went back to her ledger like the conversation had never happened. There's a kind of truth that doesn't want your camera or your boots or your voice. It just wants you to not be an idiot in a place where old problems, mine shafts, soft stone, rising water, still do patient work. There's another kind that does want your voice, if only to be the kind of voice that says, "Stay out, keep living. I'm not going to tell you the holler where it happened." You can guess. People always do. I will tell you this. If you're a person who hears a whoop in the trees and decides the world is smaller than your fear, you will keep making the world smaller until there's no room in it for anything but your voice. If you're a person who hears it and feels your bones lengthen to fit a story older than your name, you might live long enough to learn where the soft ground is without falling in. Sometimes nights when the creek is low and the moon is bright as old bone, I drive out past the barricade and sit on my tailgate where the gravel turns to dirt. I don't leave food. I don't leave anything. I just listen. 1, 2, 3 knocks, somewhere deep. A pause. 2 more. I rap my knuckles on the truck bed twice and keep my mouth shut, and the ridge breathes, and the dark between the pines feels full of something that isn't out to terrorize me at all. It's out there doing its job.